look like to build your creative work around being genuinely, authentically yourself. I'm Sarah, and this is Creatives Processing, where creatives reveal their process and process what it means to create. In this episode, I talk to creative director, videographer, and photographer Eliana Mendez. Eliana calls their approach human-centric storytelling, and they mean it in the most practical way possible. They've built their entire business around the idea that genuine connection isn't just nice to have, it's the thing that makes their work irreplaceable. What really hooked me was how Eliana uses professional wrestling as a metaphor for their creative process. And before you're like, Sarah, what the hell are you talking about? Just trust me, it's legit a perfect way to think about the balance between having a plan and staying open to what emerges in the moment. Eliana walks me through their journey to starting their business, and there's this moment where they realize that literally everyone around them could see the value in their work except for them. And if that ain't the creative experience in a nutshell. But what I love most is how Eliana has turned their values into their competitive advantage. They're not just talking about authenticity because it sounds good. They're showing you exactly how caring about people translates into better work and better business. So whether you're trying to figure out how to stand out in your field, or you're just curious about what it really means to build authentic professional relationships, this conversation is going to give you a lot to think about. All right, let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Eliana Mendez.
I'm a human-centric visual storyteller based out of Portland, Oregon. I build authentic, grounded, genuine media assets that are designed to get to people's hearts and stick in their minds, motivate people to participate, attend an event, donate, buy something. But I do all of that with genuine human connection. I try to let my subjects be who they are and speak the way they speak and tell stories from the heart. Because in my experience, that is the best way to connect people and connect people to stories.
It's amazing. Now, how did you get started doing this?
My dad was a photographer. I inherited some of his Nikons when he died, when I was a young person. And then I went to journalism school. I was a big-time journalism nerd. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. And journalism was always a good way for me to capitalize on some of my innate talents, being good at photography and being curious and being a good conversationalist, learn things about the world. And there's always been this, I think a long-term goal that's always sort of been in the back of my mind is that living this sort of life and making this sort of art is a really good way to see the world. It's a really good way to learn about different cultures, eventually travel for work. So I went to journalism school. I worked in marketing and communications for a while after that, ran people's social media channels. Kind of enjoyed that, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing. Eventually got fired from a job and started my own LLC. Really struggled to know what I was doing for a lot of years. And, I had some really good mentors. I experienced this thing in my career where I think I was sort of succeeding at it before I knew. And I had some really good mentors help me understand how much of my success and what I was able to do and what I was able to deliver for clients was intrinsic to who I am and the way I carry myself. And the more and more I've come to embrace that and understand that connection between who I am as a person and who I am as a professional, the better I can serve my clients, the better I can understand what the work actually is and how I create value. And I would say I've had a really good idea how to run a business for a few years now, which is nice. I've had a really good idea how to talk about that business for a little less, maybe a year.
I think you are well on your way. I am
Right.
so impressed with the way that you've defined who you are as a creative, how you work, why you work. Can you dive into a little bit more about your philosophy and your values with your approach to work?
Yeah, sure. So I call myself a human-centric photographer and videographer. That manifests in a few different ways. One of them is that I've learned that my ideal clients, the sort of projects that I really want to work on, are with people and on initiatives that value that, where that level of human connection is something that's really valuable to whatever they're trying to do, which is usually like get them to buy something, get them to donate, get them to come to an event the next year, some sort of goals like that. So at this point, I've really learned that aligning with those goals and making sure that we are at least somewhat aligned on the approach of that and what we value in that is at the forefront. If that's not there, it's probably not the best gig for me. There are a lot of photographers and videographers who are a little bit more of like a commodity-based provider. It's more like they're being hired for a technical skill. Someone wants to check a box and get like some photos for a thing, and that's all good and fine. That's not really what I do. I try to create assets where people look at my photos a lot, really kind people look at my photos a lot and talk about how they get a sense of who the person is on the other side. They get a sense of what they were experiencing. There's a sense not just of joy, but of, I guess, their guard being down. They feel accepted and acknowledged and seen in that moment. And I think there is so much to that subtle communication, right? In body language and facial expressions, you can see we're so intrinsic as humans. You can pick up so much on what someone is feeling in that moment. And I really, really work hard to center that in my work. When I am shooting an event or shooting some portraits, I work really hard to try to remove a lot of the things that I think are normally between a photographer and the subject in that process. I don't bring a ton of lights. I don't bring a big crew. I don't have a big intimidating camera. I try to take the technology out of the situation as much as possible and make it about the interaction with the person. And, at an event, that's really brief. At an event, it might be like 10 seconds that I'm talking to someone. But I try to make sure that 10 seconds communicates genuine interest in that person, meeting them right where they're at in that moment, not requiring something bombastic or posed or agenda driven, just making it about that person and that moment. And it's really heart feeding work. I have to voice that approach a lot, and I've gotten really nimble at describing the value of that approach, because not everyone understands. Even people who like me and like my work, I have to sort of re-message and work hard to position the value of that approach. But I'm really dedicated to it and really excited about it because, even as recently as the last few weeks, I'm really coming to understand that advocating for the value of real, genuine connection when it is most difficult, like when things feel dark, when it feels impossible, when someone doesn't understand the value of genuine connection, like making an argument for it, both like tactfully in my communication and in my literal work, in those moments, that is where I create value. That's actually it. That's the piece where I am creating something that is unique in the market, that makes people feel good, that gathers and draws people who are similarly minded to me and my work. And I feel a deep sense of personal alignment about it. It's how I want to run my business and how I want to live my life.
Yeah. I'm so curious. Can you tell me more about a little bit about, before we dive into like the nitty gritty of your process from start to finish, talk to me a little bit about your journey coming to this point of discovering that value alignment is your philosophy when it comes to work, and having to, I'm sure there was trial and error working with clients where starting out, perhaps you were more commodity based, just like you just need a photo, I'll shoot it, that's fine. Like, talk to me a bit about that journey to this point.
Wow. There's a lot wrapped up in that. It's like the core of it feels like this friction between, I think a big question that comes up in my mind is like, what do you do when you're freaked out and you need to survive, right? Like, what do you reach for? And I think early in my artistic journey, I had to, through like a lot of pain and a lot of changes and a lot of asking myself who I am, I had to get away from a lot of people and systems and companies and partners for whom their answer to that question is to look to external authority and do what they want, do what they need, do what they ask for, do what they indicate. And it's complex, right? Because like getting my clients what they need, that is my job. That's what it is. But I think what's really emerged for me is that there is a particular and style and approach to those relationships that makes the work effective, right? Like if I am bringing that same care and consideration and genuine interest to the client relationship that I am to my relationship with the subject, I will build media for them that fits their goals. And in the beginning, there was so much just sort of general business growth. I didn't totally know exactly what my offer was, how to position it, how to price it, et cetera. But there was definitely this feeling, especially I would say about like 3 years ago, where everyone around me saw the value in what I was doing before I did. And I had to do a lot of work. I am still doing a lot of work to figure out why that discrepancy is there. Like, why do I not always see the value in that when people outside of me can look at me and say, like, your work is great. Like, you are doing a great job relationally. There is value here. Why didn't I understand that?
That resonates so much. Yeah, it's
hard.
like
it's hard.
downplaying your own value, just not understanding your own worth. It's like that confidence that like you should have, and like when it comes out and like your actual work that you're doing, it's so hard to just like, no, I'm a badass. I'm doing amazing work. Like, why can't I? It's a phenomenon that I am still also struggling with.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And sometimes the answers are really simple. Like sometimes it's just been someone telling me like, yo, you got to charge more. Like, I think there was this light bulb moment for me at some point that I would recommend to any entrepreneur, anyone starting a small business, where you have to figure out the life you want to live, the sort of lifestyle you want to have, what your goals are, work backwards from there.
Yes.
As long as you're in this mindset of like, well, I'm not getting enough now, so I can't possibly ask for more. I think that's the place that so many creative professionals get stuck, right? And the thing that they don't necessarily understand about business at that point is that, and it's more than just price, it's also positioning, the way you message yourself, but you are actually making an intentional, meaningful decision there. The way you decide to price and position yourself, you are deciding who your clients are, like the sort of people you want to work with. And it isn't as simple as like they're rich or they're poor. Like it isn't about that. It's about what do they value? What do they think is like going to give them a return? Do they understand that return? Are we going to align as people? So much of that is a part of the work. And, I'm getting a little away from your original question, but I think for a lot of my career, and in my personal life, that struggle of having to voice that value felt really dark. And sometimes running up against that friction, running up against like, wow, people might not value genuine connection. Like people might not get that that's a powerful way to motivate people or to connect with people. And running into, I wouldn't say objections, but like a lack of alignment with people about it. There were times in my career where that has felt like a fail state, where it's like, okay, if I'm running into that friction, something is wrong. This is the wrong person, this is the wrong project, etc. But I'm really very recently coming to better understand that in those moments, if I have a client where I've done the work, we understand each other's goals, we understand each other's values, we know what we're trying to accomplish. I care about the relationship. They care about the relationship with me. They understand the value of my work, right? But maybe they don't understand that my creative perspective and this approach is what makes the work valuable. Maybe they don't fully understand that. I've really come to better understand that in those moments, I have an expertise, my perspective and experience in that moment, and being able to voice that experience and being able to voice that understanding of how to connect with people through media delicately and tactfully communicating that to those clients that I care about, that is actually what people pay me for. Like,
Yes.
that is the crux of my value, is communicating that and advocating for that. And sometimes it's as simple as being like, we got to stay the course. We built a good process. We made a good plan. We have to stick to this. But I think in the past in my career where I saw that as like, oh, shit, I gotta I gotta defend the value of genuine connection again.
Yeah.
Like, I have failed. I'm coming to better understand that, like, that's the moment. That's the moment where the spotlight is on me, and it's like time to do my thing.
Yeah, it's
And
like
I
a
think
mix
that's
of
a lot, a
like
lot.
it's sales, but it's
Mhm.
also like deftly explaining the process and
Yeah,
how the process ends with a better final product that is more
yeah,
effective. And why don't we talk a little bit about that process? Because
sure.
you're explaining it to your clients, you are selling them on the process, the expertise. I want to know, um, has there been a project that you can talk about from like
Mm.
start to finish, like you're preparing the project, your research and ideation, all of those steps, help, as if I'm your client, like help me walk through like what I'm getting in the end from start to finish.
Sure. No, yeah, totally. So, I made a video not too long ago. A lot of my work these days is making impact videos for nonprofits and foundations and community organizations that speak to the impact of their work. And they're usually trying to secure funding. That's usually their goal, is to get either private funders or government funders to renew funding or increase funding or keep funding going so they can keep doing their thing. I do work in that capacity with the Northwest Health Foundation. Really love them. They do wonderful work in our community. They're focused on not health in like the healthcare sense, but like community health. And I made a video for them
Talk about
about something.
value aligned. Like,
I know, right? I know. I know. I made a video for them about something called the Justice Reinvestment Equity Program. It's a $10 million state-funded program that gives money to community organizations that are doing things like reentry, drug treatment, youth violence prevention, arts programs for young people, stuff like that. And it all has this culturally informed lens, right? If it isn't culturally informed, the people in this program understand that if they're not thinking about where someone's coming from and what their experience, their lived experience is, that they're going to miss them. They're not going to serve them as well, right? It's a big part of their work. So that was a really wonderful project for a number of reasons, both because I have deep respect for that client's, the care and attention that they bring to their work. And it was this exercise in trying to figure out how to bridge the gap, build a bridge between my approach and their approach and reach a good end goal. The first step in my process is always really understanding what the goal is. What are we trying
yes,
to get people to feel? What do you want them to go on and do? Not just now, but in a year, in 5 years,
absolutely.
in 10
Long-term
years.
planning. Yeah.
Yes, like, I'm going to give you an asset. I charge my clients for the long-term communicative asset of my art product. Like, I give them an art product that's going to motivate people to feel something and do something for years. That's the goal, right? So the first step in my process, I've called it different things over the years, but the first step is always to really make sure I understand what those goals are. These days, then I try to build a proposal that shows a really clear understanding of what their goals are, their timeline, what they're trying to achieve, and tie that directly to what I'm going to deliver and really, really be explicit about here's how I'm going to deliver that value. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's what the process looks like. Once we, sign an agreement, understand how we're going to move forward, and we make sure we have like real consensus. So there's this style that I've sort of carved out at this point and it closely follows a journalistic model where you have these sort of institutional people who are in a role of authority, either within the organization or within the community, who can speak to those exact talking points. Those are the people who are like well practiced at saying, this is the purpose of this program. This is why we go about it the way we go about it. And they can bring some of that like institutional grit, like the real clear understanding of the goals. But when I was talking to the people who run the community organizations, we had specific questions that we built together and treatments to decide like what those interviews should look like. But a lot of what ends up being really rich in those sessions is stripping that all away and asking them things like, what do you love about your job? why did you start doing this? What
Yeah.
is like, what lights your heart up on a day-to-day basis? Because
it's about human connection in the end. Like,
yes, and they don't always get asked those questions. They don't always get
yeah.
to talk about those things. So in my work, especially my video work, there is that pairing very frequently of organizational, client-based, like institutional priorities that I sort of build as like, if you're writing a journalistic article, the model is like, here's a paragraph of the straight facts, letting you know what the facts are. Here's a quote from out in the world of someone telling you what that feels like. And it creates this feeling of, okay, I have a clear understanding of the subject matter of what this program is about. And I understand what these people feel when they're in it, when they're participating in it, when they're dealing with their clients, when they're helping someone. And that pairing, that builds meaningful stories. That builds stories that people remember. They understand what their role is, how they're going to participate in it, whether it's donating or following or whatever it might be. And that's what produces assets that I think are ultimately motivating. So what we built in that instance was a video about each of the constituent organizations that dug a little deeper into who they are and why they do what they do. And then an overall video about the entire program. And something that I think we were really successful at achieving in that program is illuminating the like vast network of community organizations that actually make up our social safety net, that actually make sure that people are going to be okay when they need help. Because it's so much more than just governments and so much more than just the Northwest Health Foundation. And it's so much more than each of these individual organizations.
Yeah.
There's this like web of people who frankly like give us the socialism that we don't get from our government,
Yep.
And we did a really wonderful job of illuminating that. And they haven't voted to renew the funding yet. Fingers crossed. I think we're going to know in a few months.
Yeah.
But I really hope we're successful because I think, bottom line, you could tell how much the people who are receiving those funds care, how seriously they take the opportunity to expand their work, serve more people, serve them in a better way. And I think if we've done our job right, and I think we did, that is what's going to get someone who's pretty removed from that process. For them, it's just like maybe a value they hold and a line item on a budget, giving some sort of human connection to what that line item means. I'm hopeful is what is going to lead them to vote to renew the funding.
I'm curious, coming from a journalism background and having that rubric of what makes a solid article is stating the facts, quote from the real world. Like, if it ain't if it's not broken, don't try and fix it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, outside of that formula, how are you generating ideas going into a video shoot? Is it really more dependent on, if you already have the goals set, that's one thing. But when it comes to like cropping or framing or, choosing a location, how are those ideas coming about?
That's a good question. It's sort of two-pronged in terms of the technical mastery, right? Like the framing, the lighting, the audio. A lot of that is practice and trust. It's caring a lot about it and having really like defined pre-production routines to make sure I have the right equipment and I've prepared properly and I've thought about what we're going to need and what the post-production is going to look like. Doing all that work that's very similar to normal film production, right?
Can you talk a little bit about that pre-production routine?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Totally. So, it's as simple as like charging batteries, thinking about audio backups, making sure that, part of what I try to do when I'm making a video is I don't do a lot of field backup, but when I get back home and I hate using this word because it sounds like it's trash, but it's not. When I dump the footage.
Call it like it is. You're dumping the footage.
Yes. I make sure I record. I have these little wireless lav mics that I use for all my subjects, and I make sure that we are recording audio in like 4 different ways. There's like room
Yes.
audio, there is the audio directly on the mics, there's the audio that the video recorder picks up as it syncs with the mics. And this is the backup, use in worst case scenario. The camera itself has a microphone. That's always my
Yeah.
like backup, right? So I'm always trying to make sure there are those redundancies. And when I get home and I dump the footage, we need a new term for that. When I download the footage, I've built a system where the second I put it on my local hard drive, now we're getting into the technical aspects. Once it's on my local hard drive, it is immediately backed up in 3 places locally and into the cloud. So I don't have any wood around. I have never lost.
So you're like looking at the cloud around you. It's all around us.
Yes, there's some wood in here somewhere. I have never lost a client's photos. I've never lost a client's videos. I have never had a memory card fail. Like, I am really vigilant about those pieces, right?
So is this like this over preparedness? It didn't come from a mistake in the past. It's just like part of your personality, just like knowing I need to be over prepared here.
Yeah, I think it's part of who I am. And also, for me, a big part of it is motivated by the research I do into the subjects beforehand. You know, like I was interviewing this person named Tammy, who she works in an organization called Tyus Yachts. They do drug treatment and reentry programs, mostly for the Native community in Klamath Falls. And she is the 3rd generation person in her family to run this organization. Like, her grandmother started this organization, you know? That's how meaningful it is to them. So that's what I'm holding in my heart when I'm charging all my mics and making sure I have backup batteries and testing my camera and my video recorder to make sure things are working properly, and making sure the mics are synced, and recording, you know, a video of my dog Lola here in my apartment to make sure everything is working before I set out in the field. Like, I'm doing all that because I care about the subject. Because if I ask them an open-ended emotional question and they pour their heart out and they're in tears, and I don't get it because I didn't have my ducks in a row in terms of my equipment, that's so disrespectful.
Absolutely.
You know? I don't want to make them feel that way.
Something that you said that was really interesting, because I mean, you're doing the research yourself about each of these people. So this isn't, you know, you're getting a list from your clients of like who they want to feature, but then it's still up to you as the creative here to like do all this background research. You know,
Totally.
that's kind of bringing in like your journalism background too. Like, you're not just a person with a camera. Like, what does research look like for you? Are you just like, you know, Googling? Are you doing like pre-phone calls, references? What does that look like?
It's a good question. I mean, sometimes I speak to the subjects beforehand, especially if it's like, you know, if I'm making a brand video for a small business or an organization, and they're part of the pre-production and the creative process. In this instance, you know, the Northwest Health Foundation has been a really wonderful partner because they are very thorough in their pre-production. They are really, really good at letting me know the messages they want to make sure are included, who these people are, why they're important to the process. For that particular project, I do remember asking a lot of questions of like, I don't mean to pick on Tammy in particular, but she'd probably get a kick out of it. Like, who is this person? What do they like? Like, what do they care about? What's unique about their work? Like, what do they like to talk to? I really try to ask a lot of those sort of questions. And, you know, you were asking earlier about sort of like setting environment and locations. I think in a traditional film production, which I've not really been involved in, I've made some films, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't necessarily worked in the industry. In traditional film production, you know, they do location scouting, and it's about technical logistics. Like, is the lighting going to be good here? Is the sound going to be overpowered by the airplanes going out? Whatever, right? It's not that I don't do that, but in my practice, you know, there's probably like a ratio there that we could define, but I am way more focused on what is going to make this person feel comfortable. What emotions do they experience in these environments? And it isn't just about like ease for the subject. It's about creating an environment and a setting that is part of the story. Like it's part of the nature of how they accomplish their work. And there's details in the environment that speak to that. And there's a sense of lived history and memory, because it isn't just good for B-roll. It isn't just good to like get some shots of the family on the bulletin board behind Tammy when she's done talking, but Tammy's going to feel that too. If Tammy is in her office and she's surrounded by mementos about doing this work, and she showed me a newspaper clipping that's in her office of her grandmother, I think, and her grandfather starting this organization. And like the fact that that is in the room affects how Tammy answers the questions.
Absolutely. Versus like we're in a studio, it's cold, there's lights everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. So I think bringing that's the crux of my work. That's the difference in my work. That's what makes me different from other videographers. That's what makes me different from traditional film production, is that I am centering, I really believe this, it sounds salesy, but it's true. Like I am centering the relationship piece of the work in every part of the production process. And it's the same with photos, like I will do headshots for an organization or group photos for an organization, and frequently they might be more concerned on their end, which is understandable, about like brass tacks logistics, like this conference room is available at this time and like, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And in the pre-production process for a shoot like that, I'm always trying to be like, how can I make sure that this is fun for the people involved?
Yeah.
What
you
can
don't
we
want it
be
to feel
doing?
like school picture day where you're sitting on a stool and it's just like factory line just after another. It's like, how can we get like some actual personality here? This is a representation of your company, like even down to like staff photos. Like people are looking at that, and if people look miserable and they look like stock, like that's a representation of the company's values.
100%. And there's this idea, I think, both sometimes with clients that I tactfully massage. I don't think anyone's ever combined those phrases before. Like with the clients themselves, but also, film production, like Hollywood film production, is a very different thing. But I also think this is something that makes me unique compared to those people too, is that I want to make sure that the session we have together, even for something like team pictures, right? The session we have together, it exists within the world these people live and work in. Like it is part of the flow of their daily lives. It is not majorly different from what they experience on a regular basis. Maybe there's a sense of fun and adventure and it's picture day, but my thought process is often like, how can I make this a memorable, engaging experience for the people involved? Not because that's a nice to have, but because that's what's going to make the photos good. Like you're going to be able to tell that they feel that way, and then I brought that care, and that's part of the overall story we tell, right? And I think there is a misconception, and I might be a little bit of a rarity in the photo and video space about this, but there's a misconception that the way to execute and the way to achieve your creative goals is to be really meticulous and controlling about those things, right? And like professionalism and preparation, like I was talking about, is very important, and I am meticulous about those things. But when it comes to the quality of the media that we produce, I think to make really high impactful media, you have to leave some room for surprise. You have to leave some room for the human element, for what they're going to feel, what you don't know about them, what you don't know about the way they communicate. That's something that I learned from journalism, is leave some room for what you don't expect to come up in the conversation, what you don't expect them to say. And when I'm planning environments, where we're going to do the shoot, what it should look for, it's more than just like, where do you put the lights? It's about creating an environment where the subjects feel comfortable expressing those things, because people will be able to tell. People will able to, it's like I use the word authentic all over my marketing, but it's so true. People know when something's real, and they trust that.
It reminds me of Greta Gerwig filming a scene from Lady Bird, where the two of the young characters, they're running through the rose garden. It's just footage of her just like directing them, just like, and now fall down, and now laugh, and like just kind of like letting them play with each other. And so
Sure.
much of
Yeah.
her directing is like creating like a comfortable space for people to just like embody the character and feel comfortable. But it also reminds me, leaving that space for people to fill in. It reminds me of the ending of The Graduate, where main two characters, they've just run away. Spoiler if you haven't seen The Graduate. It's fine. It's a great movie if you've ever heard of it.
Sure.
But at the end of it, the two are in the back of a bus. They've just run away, and the camera lingers, and it was supposed to cut, but the director just allowed it to keep on running, and then to see the awkwardness of the two actors, like the realization, like, what have we done? What are we doing? Where are we going? Just kind of allowing that to happen and creating that space for like realness to come in. And I'm just thinking a little bit, it's all about human connection, and hearing about the research that you're doing going into these projects. You yourself are looking to make a connection with these people. So much of it isn't just you are creating a connection for the audience. So much of your work is tied to you understanding the message, understanding the people, because it's through your eye that these messages are being told.
100%. And I don't think that perspective is part of it, and it's part of the value I bring to the work. And it isn't the same value that everyone else brings to work. Like, that is my unique value proposition. And that's something that, when I was in journalism school, that was something that I think the field was struggling to reckon with. There was this feeling of old guard in journalism that you're not supposed to have a perspective and you're supposed to be neutral. That was the word that people always used, was neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in journalism school, there was this new generation coming up that had been raised on the internet. That was, we were blogging when we were out in the field, etc. Like, we're using our flip cams. Like, okay, now I'm like.
Did you have a live journal or a dead journal?
I never had a live journal.
Really?
I had a MySpace for my bands. I learned a little HTML, but never had a live journal.
Play?
I'm the singer.
Of course you are. Amazing.
I don't want to carry equipment.
I am 100% with you. I wanted to play the drums so bad, but I was like, I already have back problems as a 15-year-old. Like, I can't exacerbate this even more.
Yeah, you got to be reasonable about these things. Yeah. But, it was a time where there was this young guard coming up that the idea that your media was not going to have a perspective, they were like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And we were right. Yeah. I think 21st century media completely rejects the idea that you're coming from this like neutral place, because, honey, that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And the reality is there were people who were of, let's say, demographics that have a little more institutional power, where their idea that there was a neutral place to come from made sense to them.
Of course.
But I think if you are trying to do work, especially in like intersectional, like multifaceted, diverse communities, you gotta ditch that shit right away. And, media that has a perspective and a voice that also respects the subject's perspective and voice, that's the sweet sauce. It's like finding that common ground, that really makes things powerful.
You can have data, but you can also have heart and humanity within data.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it's part of what I try to do really gently in my relationships with my clients is like, they're not always going to understand that. They are making an investment and they want to make sure they get a return on that investment. And, they definitely don't want to hear me say like, we're just going to wing it, which is certainly not what I do.
Yeah. It's like hearing you like talk more about your process. I mean, if I was not in the field that I'm in and I was outside of it and I'm just trying to, get a message across, I have set an amount of dollars to get this done, and hearing like, so you're not writing a script ahead of time. How will you get the message across would be
totally
like panic inducing, like how I'm investing money in this person, but how do I know that they're going to get to that end result that's going to make this effective? Like, what's the ROI there?
100%, and I think It's really interesting. Photos are like this to an extent, but there's this thing with photos where everyone's used to taking photos from a technical standpoint, and there's also this like sort of instinctual understanding when something is meaningful. Like, people don't always know exactly what's appealing to them about a photo, but they feel it, they know it. Oh, I remember that one, that stands out to me. They frequently will just say, like, that's good. And they're not talking about the technical aspects of the work. They're not talking about like my lighting or my editing skills. They're talking about the respect and the relationship I have with the subject in that moment. Like, that's what they're actually recognizing. If the point of a film is that war is horrible, okay? The film never stops and someone looks into the camera and says, war is horrible. That never happens. They put characters on screen who have an experience that they design so that you empathize with them. And through that shared experience, you both experience that war is horrible. That's how that media works. And, scripts are important sometimes, and scripts have their place. But I think keeping an eye on the fact that relating to other human beings is how we get powerful messages like that across. And putting words in their mouth is not usually the best way to do that, at least in my professional opinion.
Let's talk about, okay, so project has started, you've done your research. Now we're at that point where you're actually on set, and you're not winging it at this point. Now you're at this phase, like, what does the actual on set look like for you?
There's a really intense internal experience that I'm doing at that point where I'm trying to be meticulous and detail oriented about my technical execution and making sure the camera's in the right place. And then it's almost like getting grounded. Like, when I start interacting with the subject or conducting an interview, I really try to strip all that away. It's like I take a big deep breath and let it all out. And I make sure that, like, okay, the mic's working, the camera's set up, we're rolling. Like, I got my backups going. Okay, now be in the room.
Yes.
Now be in the room with this person and don't worry about any of the rest of it. And bring active attention to what they're saying. And it's really interesting because there's this really nuanced balance that I think I'm doing in those moments between preparation and trust. Because to an extent, just like I'm trying to make viewing the media an emotional experience for the audience, I try to trust my own emotional instincts in that moment too. When I'm shooting B-roll around Tammy's office, I like, even now I feel some imposter syndrome saying this and thinking a client wouldn't love it. I don't storyboard that shit. Like, I trust my instincts to understand what's emotionally pertinent to the interview and the story being told when I'm in the room. I embed myself like a journalist. I embed myself in the environment and I follow the flow of what's going on in the environment to figure out what's important. Where do people gather? What are they talking about? Like, looking around the environment, what has signs of life? What connects to the feeling of mutual support and having a community-minded approach to care? Like, are there objects in this room that speak to that? And it's interesting because I think where some creators, and if a client would prefer someone who strictly storyboards, that, respect, get it. But when you're a journalist, there's this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of research to make sure I'm bringing respect to the subject, to the work they do and the life they've led and the situation we're finding each other in, because you want to show respect for that relationship. But sometimes there's this attitude of like, well, I'm going to gather everything that could be rich and connective that's possible. I'm going to get all the shots that call to my heart and my eye when I'm in the environment. The process of figuring out like what shots work best, that happens later. Like, at least in my process, and that's not every video creator's process, but for me, I try to trust my own emotional instincts about what is speaking to me throughout the process. Because I really do believe that need for the connection, that reaching for connection that human beings want to do is so intrinsic. Even if, in a human life, there can be so much organization and anxiousness and worry. But when you strip all that away, we want to connect with one another. We want to understand one another. We want to be in community with one another. And so I really try to use that as the engine and motivation to my entire creative process. And it's a delicate balance because you want to show respect and care for how important this work is and the size of the client's investment. But frequently that is what I find myself working hard with a lot of care and a lot of intention to advocate for in the creative process, is creating that room. I think part of what got me there in terms of my process too was, it makes me think about two genres that I think do this really well, right? Comedies function this way. Even on the Hollywood level, when they're shooting a comedy, I know you know better than most, when you're shooting a comedy, there's obviously lots of preparation that goes into it because you're spending big studio dollars and time is money, etc. But I think people who have been making comedies over the century, however long I've been doing that, they know that you have to leave some room for the personalities and improvisation and what the day feels like and what's making everyone laugh on set and the funny thing that someone said in the trailer beforehand that you want to get into the movie. And they leave room for all of that. That's part of their creative process. They understand that you can feel that that's real. It feels like real human beings making each other laugh. And, I think a lot of the great comedies throughout history have correctly incorporated that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other genre that it makes me think of is that I love professional wrestling. And there is something I love about professional wrestling is that it is a really delicate creative dance that they're doing, right? And I think something they accomplish really well, and people can roll their eyes about professional wrestling if they want, but this is a
and I would say don't yuck other people's yums.
yes. I was watching WrestleMania yesterday. There were 62,000 paying customers in that stadium, so something's working, But the way they do that, the way they get people to pay attention, right, is that they are so meticulous. It's like my work. They are so meticulous about the production part of it, right? Having the right equipment, the skilled technical execution, the way they edit shots together, the way when the music comes on, what someone's costume looks like. All of that is meticulously planned, right?
That's theater, yeah.
It's theater. And something that's unique about wrestling is similar to my work, they know the goal. The goal is that John Cena needs to win the championship and people need to boo him. Okay, right? The goal is that we have to make this lady good. She's the hero now. How do we make her the hero, right? They understand that goal. But when they're in the ring, those people are improvising. They are? Oh, yes. They know. They call them high spots. So there are certain things that they know are going to happen. They're what would be cool is if at some point we get on the top rope and we do this thing. They know those, they practice those, but the actual interaction that they're having in the ring is improvised. They are whispering to each other. They have hand signals. They squeeze each other's arm. They do. I should be careful because I'm blowing up the secrets of the business. So you're not supposed to do that.
You need to send me some videos on this because I'm hooked. I need to know the secrets.
That's part of the art form. Part of the art form is that they understand that when they get in the ring, there is a relationship that they're having with the audience, and that is the most important thing. They need to respect that relationship. They sometimes call creative audibles together, both the wrestlers and the production team, when the crowd turns, I'm gonna keep going on this.
Please, I love it.
A specific example, WrestleMania 18, right? There's a person here who sucks that I'm gonna name. screw him, but it's a good example, right? Hulk Hogan had just come back. Screw Hulk Hogan, but Hulk Hogan had just come back, right? And the premise of the match was that Hulk Hogan was the bad guy and The Rock was the good guy, right? So it's an incredible moment. I'll send you the video. I encourage anyone to look up this match. It's really special. It's in the Houston Astrodome, I think. There's like 80,000 screaming fans, right? Once they got in the ring and they started wrestling, it became really clear that The Rock was not the good guy, that people wanted to cheer for Hulk Hogan, right? So they changed the nature of the match live in the ring. They decided, okay, well, Hulk's going to have to be the good guy because that's what these people want.
Wow.
And they knew to do that because those are two of the most experienced professionals in their field. One of them is a racist asshole, but those are two of the most like experienced professionals in their field. And they understood that you can't plan for everything. Sometimes you have to roll with the punches. And I think that is really like not dissimilar from the nature of my work. You know, I want to understand the goals, whether it's to entertain people or to motivate them or to reach their hearts or make them feel something. But if you're in a room full of people and someone is pouring their heart out and there's a direction that calls to you creatively in that moment, you got to follow that shit. And it might not be what's in the script. And it might not be what you expected. And it might not be what you prepared for. But if you feel something about it, it's worth following because the audience will probably feel that too, you know? And I think that's like, it's part of the nature of having a relationship with your audience that if you put at the forefront of your work, whether you're a journalist or a filmmaker or whatever, it's hard to go wrong. There's an extent to which you have to be in the room. You have to be present in the room and sort of surrender to that. No matter how much preparation you gave into it. And, you know, if the crowd isn't digging something, if something doesn't feel like it's connecting, you have to be prepared to change directions or deliver it differently or emphasize something or de-emphasize something else in your delivery or in your cadence to try to maintain that connection. And in my mind, media production is exactly the same. You have to, preparation and technical execution are really important. But just like the wrestlers, once you're in that ring, you have to trust, you're at the mercy of understanding that that's a professional and I trust that person. They're bringing something to the table that is important here. And we are going to we're going to center that relationship in the story that we're telling.
So the original founder of what the creative process was, it was determined to be a linear process where you're going from preparation to ideation to the illumination phase, then to the final implementation. But I can see part of that, but I feel like for a lot of what we do, it's non-linear. And what I'm hearing here, and I'm sure a lot of your clients may think, you're going into the day, you're shooting the video, that's the end goal there. It's you're getting to that point where you're actually creating the quote unquote media, the media assets. But the fact that you're then going back after you've recorded, you're jumping back to a research phase in a little bit because you're there, you're looking at things and you're reevaluating what messaging makes sense here to get to that end goal. What B-roll is going to supplement the message. Let's talk about how you end up refining all of this footage, all of this B-roll, all of the research that you've done to get to that end product.
Yeah. I mean, there's always in photography or videography, no matter how much it's scripted, not everything's going to hit. You have to capture a lot of footage, a lot of photos, a lot of B-roll. You have to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes you feel it in the room, what's going to be good and what's not. Sometimes you make a note to yourself, when they answer that question, that really hit me in the heart. We gotta mark that down, write down when that was, So there's a level of qualitative analysis when you get home and you look at the shots and you decide what looks good. But I was actually just in a very caring, deeply respectful, my heart is warming just thinking about it, client relationship recently. I was advocating for there is something about the nature of film specifically where there is a sense of like life and motion between the shots that is hard to evaluate. It's not really on paper. There can be a really surprising human element to, man, when I put this bit of B-roll, this establishing shot next to this quote of this person saying this particular thing, you feel something. It's a really, it is technically intense editing video, especially when you're first pouring through everything you captured. But it is also a really emotional process. There's this cool moment, I think filmmakers probably feel this too, right? Like the part that's really prepared is the goals and the research and the understanding what we're trying to accomplish. That's the part that's really defined and processed. But when you're editing a video and you have like all the different shots, in the very beginning of the editing process, it feels extremely overwhelming and chaotic. There's all these directions you could go, right? And there's this sense of trusting your instincts about what is speaking to you in that moment with the goals in the back of your mind. And then there's always this moment where suddenly the whole is illuminated. Suddenly you're like, oh, I kind of feel what this story is going to look like. And that form that starts together is not usually what you expect. There's always an element of surprise to the direction that it ends up going, right? And I think that's something that makes both like my specific approach unique, both in technical execution and in like relational execution, right? Yeah, and there's a tension there, right? Like sometimes there will be like a line that a subject says in a video that I know is important to the goals of the client. And I'm trying to choose between that answer and one that feels more emotionally resonant. And there is compromise there. There is a place there of thoughtful compromise. But I mean, I'm feeling it and getting a little away from your original question, but I think if I was giving a paid creative advice to a client or to even a peer, I think you have to follow what hits you in the heart, and you have to allow for the story that emerges, for the emergent experience as you're putting that together. Because, I mean, I don't know. This is another piece where I'm like concerned about a client hearing me say, but there's something magic about it. Like it's not an entirely quantifiable art. There is something that's a little bit woo-woo about putting it together and trusting like what you end up with. And it's almost like, I don't know, I haven't raised a kid, but it feels almost like raising a kid.
Sure.
You have best practices and you have values about that, and you have an idea of what your lived experience is and the experience that you want your kid to have. But a huge part of the process is recognizing who the kid is. Mm-hmm. And being like, oh, wow, that's not the kid I expected to have, but that's the one I have and I love them for it,
Yeah.
In that way, creating media is a lot like people. Like, you can't quantify every piece of it. And you don't want to. At least I don't.
I mean, something that you bring up such an interesting point here that you as you're developing the final product, you're editing things together, a lot of it is like heartfelt. That judgment is like creating a connection within you. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in order to be a good judge if something is going to be emotionally resonant with an audience is an understanding of yourself. And I'm curious, like, how integral is the self to your work? Because a lot of people, I mean, me, one of them, a lot of it has been yes, I am creating something for a brand, for an audience.
Mhm.
My style can mold depending on like what is right for the brand, what is right for this. But I feel like for the nature of the work that you're doing, the self, like having a line of separation between yourself and your work, it must be really blurred there.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, at this point, it's really difficult to find the line between my life and my career. Like they are the same thing. My values are the same. The way I approach things is the same. And for me, that is all about human connection. It's all about cherishing that connection, valuing those moments that feel truly connective, centering that in my work, I think is what makes it effective. Um, yeah, I don't know how to take myself out of that situation. I don't want to. When I'm in a room interviewing someone who runs a community organization and their work is really important, the thing that's going to make my eye and my ear excellent, effective in that moment is that I'm holding them in my heart. I'm holding space for them. I care about them. That's what makes the work good. It's the same in the editing. It's like, I think you hear it when you talk to filmmakers or you talk to actors, right? Like they like fall in love with their characters. There's a sense of knowing who that character is outside of who they are offset, right? But my work is somewhat documentary in nature. My work is rooted in the real world. I do scripted fictional stories for clients sometimes. I do photo shoots where there's a level of like, is edifice the word? There's a level of like artificiality
Sure. Yeah.
to the moment that we're trying to connect. But for me, the media that I create, I have really gone down a road where my belief is that you do not have to create as much of that whole cloth as you think you do. Real human stories are enough. Someone's lived experience is more interesting than something we can make up for them to say. I really believe in that. I really think that there's something really connective about showing respect for those experiences because people are interesting. Like their work is interesting. Their passion is interesting. And that is going to connect with audiences. And my experience is part of that too, for sure. Like the fact that I am like a trans Puerto Rican in that room and have that perspective, the fact that I lost a parent when I was young, the fact that, my heartbreak, my jubilation, like all of that is in the room. I'm a person too. That's part of what someone's paying for is my perspective as a creator. I don't know. I think when media creators are really effective, they are embracing all of that simultaneously. There might be an agenda, there might be a script, but I don't know. I'm feeling emotional just talking about it. Like sometimes things just really come together, and if you've gathered the right people and you've done the right preparation, there is something really magical to the way that comes together. That feels real and true, even if it is scripted. It feels real. The experience is real and true.
Sure.
Yeah, that wandered because of my emotionality, but hey, not sorry.
Don't be sorry for that. I mean, like this is what I want to hear. I'm so interested. So you're at this point now. You've edited the video. What does that moment of delivery look like? You've already you've done as much as you could do, selling your client and the stakeholders on the process. How important human connection is to getting a message across. Maybe it's not saying the message, looking directly at the camera, beat by beat by beat. What does that delivery look like?
Yeah.
Do you have like, do they have final cut approval? What is like, where is feedback there? Are there like rounds at that point?
Well, that's an interesting question because that is a part of my process that has evolved a lot. I used to just send them a link. Here it is. I'd take it or leave it was
Done.
not the vibe, but process wise, it felt a little bit more like that.
Yeah.
These days, I try to sit with them. I try to say, like, can we find some time to hook up on a call or sit with each other in a room if we have that sort of relationship and we're working on a big project and look through this. And I will tell you, like, I included this photo because this detail is really resonant. I think this photo is going to help you achieve your goals for these reasons. I think this photo will be a good one for a newsletter because it speaks to these particular values. Like, I try to walk them through that, and it's a really transparent process. I'm really genuine about, like, hey, I included this shot because I think it has this something, it has this feeling. And and the client's not always going to get it. Like, I'm thinking in particular, like, in terms of editing and asking for edits, I have some like business practices around that I'll get into, but there's this funny thing that happens a lot where my clients don't always understand the purpose of establishing shots. Like, they frequently sort of like, they're like, oh, that photo of the outside of the building in the beginning with the pretty sunset, like, oh, we don't need that. And I know as a creator that is so important to the overall feeling for the viewer, right? Sure. They want to know, where is this? Why do I care about this? It needs to be, I'm frequently advocating to my clients, like, we need to ground this in a sense of place. Because that's what's going to make it memorable. There's something you can activate in viewers where you are encouraging them. You have to catch their attention and keep their attention, but you are encouraging them to imagine what it's like to be there with those people. That's the art of the work, right? And that work is really nuanced. There's a lot of atmospheric, environmental things that you have to pack into the work to create that feeling. In terms of, like, sort of brass tacks process stuff, like anyone who's getting into video production as a career, I think deciding how to handle client notes is one of the biggest pieces you have to consider. It's a big deal, and it's really difficult in the beginning, right? Because I think there's a perception, and anyone who does creative work, you included, will know that there might be a perception among the client that their job is to give you sometimes not the most informed notes about what they want to be different. And when you're first starting out in your career, I'm sure design is very similar. You run into clients who think that they just get to do that forever. They're just going to tell you over and over and over again, no, I want to change this, I want to change this, I want to change this. And anyone who has a creative career understands that at some point you have to take a little bit more, you have to define that process a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right? So these days, the way I tend to do it is I charge for results. I'm like, okay, here's a package. You're going to get this type of video. It's going to be this long. That's the end result. Here's, obviously the goals are still incorporated, but this package is designed to have this sort of effect and be deployed in this way. Here's how much a round of edits cost. You can put as many notes in that round of edits as you want, but we're going to go one round at a time, and I'm going to charge you per round. And if you want to have a certain amount of rounds of edits in the process, great. I'll include that in the proposal. Here's what each round costs. Here's what it adds up to. That's how I do it. And that has been really effective for me. I think there's some back and forth there. And there are sometimes on projects a place where your instincts creatively and the client's instincts creatively diverge. And that's okay. I would encourage, I feel like I'm talking to like young creators now. I would encourage any creator to make space for the possibility that the thing that you're making for your portfolio is slightly different than the thing you're making for the client. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Like when I am producing a photo set for a client, the photos that I put in the case study that I put on my website might not be the photos that the client chooses to put on their website. And that's okay.
And I think that's, not enough people know that. Mm-hmm. That took me a really long time to realize that, because it's like the sense of like, this feels like false advertising if I'm showing work that wasn't eventually approved. But then you look at other portfolios and it's like, this is spec work, this is comp, this may not have been the final product. It's like, totally. What's on your portfolio is the type of work that you want to do. So show the work that best represents you and your talents.
Totally, totally. And like the client may understand things about their audience and what's important to
Sure.
their work that you don't understand as a creative, that, you know, you might understand, like, oh, from a filmmaking perspective, this establishing shot is really important. But maybe they know that their audience doesn't have time for that. And that's their prerogative. And if they want to tell you to take that out and make up a cut that doesn't have that shot in it, I would encourage a creator to make sure you're getting paid for your time and your work on that, but give them what they want, for sure. I'm all about it. There's always a tension there, right? Like, how much do you advocate for what you know to be creatively sound when your client feels otherwise? And there can be a tricky balance there, and you don't always end up in the same place. But I think there's sort of like a harmony that you can reach there, where if you're truly equal, if you're in an equitable partnership with a client, there's no reason that you can't help them achieve their goals and get them what they want, and also achieve your goals and get what you want at the same time. There's no reason you can't do that. You got to be flexible. You got to roll with the punches a little bit. You have to be really thoughtful in your communication sometimes, but you should be able to check both boxes. It's such a big part of creative work is, I want to call it compromise, but it's almost like more nuanced than that. Like, again, there's a human element there of understanding that people are different and they have different understandings and perspectives, and like everyone's back can get scratched.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. So you've delivered. There have been edits, indeterminate number of edits, but you're finally at the end product here. It's been delivered, and there was something about your process that I found really interesting. That, I mean, with a lot of the work that I do, unless I am then hired after delivery to measure the effects of what we've done, like for a website design or branding or a new packaging launch, unless I'm hired to get a sense of like, how did this turn out? Like the actual ROI here, you do something, you actually meet with the client after a certain amount of time to like judge, like, how did this shape up?
Yes, thank you for asking about that. That's really thoughtful of you. Yeah, so when I deliver something to a client, again, I try to sit down with them. Not everyone has time, but I try to sit down with them and tell them exactly what went into my creative thinking and reasoning. After that meeting, when I deliver the final assets, I give them an asset deployment guide. It's a one pager, but I'm giving them recommendations on, like, I think this clip will really, really kill it on social media for you. I think this one would be great for the top banner of a website. I think this content would really serve you in a newsletter. I try to provide some of those recommendations that they don't have to adhere to, but.
And you're not cutting those for them. You give them like a final cut of a video, and then like if they want to make like social media clips out of it, like that's on their plate to do.
Frequently I do include as part of a package, like a variety of cuts for different reasons, here's a vertical cut of a few quotes from the interview that would be really great for an Instagram reel. Frequently my packages do include that. It's sort of like an a la carte, like add-on to whatever I'm telling them. And of course, like all my work, now I'm getting salesy. All my work includes a lifetime unlimited commercial license, so they can use the photo in their materials forever. And that includes cutting it up. Like if you want to crop something or put an Instagram filter on it, like have at it. That's great. But I try to set them up for as much success as possible, right? Like, here's the package we agreed upon. We've incorporated your notes for as many rounds as you want. Here's the finished result. And here's some recommendations on exactly how to apply it, incorporate it into your marketing flow. Because something I found really early on is that, especially like, say I'm working for an entrepreneur, let's use an example. I don't work for a lot of restaurants, but let's say I'm shooting photos at a restaurant, right? Like frequently the restaurateur doesn't understand the purpose of the photos of them. They miss that. They're like, oh no, we want a photo of the outside, and here's some photos of again, like I don't work a lot of restaurants, but it's a good example. Here's some photos of our food, here's some photos of the table. Like, great, what more do you need? I understand as a consumer and as a media creator that when someone goes on your Google Maps, for instance, and this might be something that I put in the deployment guide, right? Like when someone goes on your Google Maps, they want to see like who's going to greet me. What do they like? Do they like working there? What's the atmosphere like? Are people happy when they're in the room? So I try to both be really sure to include those sort of photos in the media package and then be really explicit to the client, like, here's why this is going to kill it for you. And frequently the clients don't understand that. Like they are, maybe they're adverse to including their own image for a variety of reasons. We all feel insecure. Sometimes we put ourselves down in that way. But I really, really try to advocate for like, no, like you're part of this story. And, I've learned that that's good business. When you are centering your values and your perspective and when you come from in your business, it's part of what business is successful because, again, we value human connection. We want to give money and patronize businesses whose story we believe in, who the people behind it we think are cool. We want to support. That's part of the nature of the work. So yes, I think you were asking about checking in with them afterwards. So 6 weeks after I deliver the final deliverables, I check in, and it's a really valuable part of my process. Early on in my career, I would just sort of tell them like, hey, would love a 5-star Google Maps review. Could you please give me one, right?
Yeah.
And I learned that like, I wasn't getting all the feedback. I wasn't always hearing like how something went for them. And the actual like ROI on a piece of media can be complicated, right? There's a lot of factors there. There's whether someone has a robust marketing plan, whether their business is sound in the first place. Like they could go out of business for all sorts of reasons. But those check-ins are really valuable. I frequently try to ask them like, what has it been like presenting this work? I make portraits sometimes for people's dating apps, and that's a place where checking in with them afterwards is really valuable because they'll tell me who they showed the photos to, and if they met someone and had a cute connection because they felt like we were portraying them in a genuine way. That stuff is so valuable. And it's also like, that feedback doesn't always make you feel good. Like sometimes I've made portraits for people and for complicated reasons that I don't really think have to do with my technical execution or the quality of the editing or any of the rest of that. They don't like them. They don't really want to use them. They don't really want to put theirs out there. And there's a lot wrapped up in there. There's like vanity and social conditioning and all sorts of other factors. But if someone has experienced that with me, I want to know. I want to know how they feel about it. Like what makes them reticent to share it? Did they share it and it made them feel bad or it didn't accomplish their goals? I got to know that. And most of the time when I get feedback like that, like something didn't help, someone did a piece of media didn't get someone where they want to go. Normally, if I've made a mistake in the process, it's that I did not understand their goals well enough at the front of the process. And so that's really why so much of my process is designed around like, okay, let's understand that at the front. And at every single point, I have that in the back of my mind. And I'm communicating to the client, like, I included this photo because of this goal you have. And this is why I think it's going to help you accomplish those goals.
The strategic creative.
100%, because you want, not just from a sales standpoint, but from like a life standpoint, you want to position yourself as a strategic partner. I think that's what's going to make your media more valuable is if you're coming to it from that perspective. Because it isn't just a commodity, there are photographers who work that way, where their photos are just sort of like a thing that they're shooting off, and like its effectiveness is not important. But the way I measure the effectiveness of my work is extremely relational. And you have to be open to that feedback. I definitely struggled with that early in my career. I didn't always know how to garner that feedback. I frequently would develop a really deep emotional connection to the work that maybe the client didn't share, and that was gutting. It was so disappointing. But I think if you are really forthcoming about why you do things the way you do at every stage of the process, like here is my creative perspective, here's why I think it's valuable, here's why I made this decision, that will help steer you long-term over the years towards clients who do get it, who do value that connection, who do have similar instincts about what's effective and what's going to be quality communication for them. And I think a big part of getting feedback afterwards is playing that long game,
Yeah. So you've walked me through your whole process, and I am so grateful because it's been enlightening and clearly, relationship building
Hmm.
and creating a real human connection are like the foundational blocks of your work and how
Mhm.
you work.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit like, are there any like behind the scenes stuff? Like, are there any rituals or practices that you use to enhance your creativity? Like, is it wrestling? Does that enhance your creativity?
Wrestling's a big part of it, honestly. There's this thing in wrestling where they're like, the one thing you don't want is no reaction at all. Like, if they cheer for you, great. If they boo you, great. If they spit at you, great. If they throw things at you, great. They're reacting. That's good.
Yeah.
We're just the wrestling is so distracting for my human heart. But no, I mean, ritualistically, that's definitely part of what I try to follow, like humanistically throughout the long game of my creative process is like, um, I don't know, is it garnering reaction? There was this thing, I'm sorry, I'm wandering a little bit, but there was this thing when I was in journalism school where um, sometimes I knew that an article had turned out good because everyone who was quoted in the article was somewhat unhappy about it. Like every single person was like, oh wow, like you put this person in here too, like I don't really know if I can agree with the ethos. And there's this feeling of like, I found the middle of the story here. I found the place where I have incorporated everyone's perspectives and everyone was considered, and it didn't tilt all the way towards any of the individual subjects. And obviously my creative process has evolved vastly since then, but I don't know, like ritualistically there's a little bit of a feeling like that. Like if you're getting a reaction, that's probably a net positive. What other rituals are in my work? That's a really good question. There's this thing when I produce videos where there's usually a day in the process where I compose the score, and I really
Wait,
value that in
are
my
you
work.
writing the music yourself too?
And all of my videos have a completely original score, and I do that for a couple reasons. I do that for
What?
a couple reasons. Yeah, I use samples sometimes, and like I'm not like getting a violin out all the time,
Okay.
but
Still.
but I try to revel in that day. It's a big part of the process, actually. I don't always tell my clients this, but the day that I get to do that, I try to put myself in as emotionally grounded a place as I can. I try to make it fun. I try to make it a day where I'm like, God, my job is so fucking cool. I get to write a song today for my.
How do you get grounded? Is it meditation? Is it like I'm up early? I've made myself a warm, delicious breakfast. I went for a walk with my dog. Like, what does that look like getting yourself grounded?
That one, like, I work for myself because I want to be able to never have a 9 a.m. meeting if I can avoid it and roll out of bed. And I sit, it's so nice that I'm in my apartment for this. I sit at my kitchen table, which is over there, and I make my coffee and I sit in the sunshine and I sip my coffee and I stare at my dog who's sitting in that chair, who stares at me lovingly. And I tell her how beautiful she is. And then we go for a walk in my neighborhood and I look at the flowers and I look at the birds, and I try to start as many of my days that way as possible. And
Yeah.
it's part of my process. It's part of my work. I try to sort of carve out that space for like, gotta be human, gotta take care of me, gotta feel good as much as possible.
I think
Uh,
especially with the work that you're doing, like reminding yourself that you are human and
mhm,
creating that space to, really center yourself, be mindful, connect with nature, connect with
mhm,
another living being, slow down and not just I'm on my phone immediately, I'm on my computer immediately, and I'm just like letting
yeah.
the blue light drain the life out of me. It's like let's get some real vitamin D in here before we sit in
Yeah.
front of the computer.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because if you're in a place where you're not taking care of your, I mean, anyone would know. If you're in a place where you're not taking care of your own needs and you're not centering your own good feelings in that way, are you going to be good at connecting with other human beings? No. Are you going to be good at creating media that connects with other human beings? Probably not. And part of the way I deliver all my photo packages to my clients within a week, and I deliver all my videos within 4 weeks. That's my turnarounds, and those are pretty tight especially for video production.
Yeah.
And I'm very dependable about it. I would also, that's like another thing that I would say to any young creative, like, have firm deadlines and deliver on those deadlines. People remember that dependability is what allows them to fit you into their process, right? But part of the reason why I designed my windows like that is like, it does not take a week of 8-hour days to edit a set of photos. It doesn't.
Right.
Sorry to like pull back the kimono so much, but it doesn't. Like, it might take a few hours, but part of the reason why I have a week is I'm like, I might wake up one day and want to do nothing but play video games. I might wake up one day and like not feel confidence in my creative perspective. That's pretty rare, but maybe I don't. Maybe I had a hard night. Maybe someone gave me bad news. Maybe my dog is sick. Like, there's all sorts of things that can happen in a human life, and
yeah. Because I was going to ask you, like, how you kind of started to answer it a little bit, but does your current mental state on any given day influence your creative output? I mean, like, the answer is yes, clearly.
Yeah, definitely. No, it does. That's a really interesting question, actually. I would not say that, like, part of being a professional is understanding holistically that I'm bringing a different mood, person, and like feeling of being in the world to the work every single day. And I don't know, there's almost this feeling of sort of like spreading it out. Like, when I work on video across those 4 weeks, there are days where I'm stressed. There are days when I'm sad. There are days when I'm happy. There are days when I love my job. There are days when I'm like, how the heck can I keep doing this? It's the whole human experience is wrapped up in that, right? But I think, like, when I'm editing a video, I would say to a client, like, the fact that I am a human being with a variety of moods and perspectives and feelings throughout the course of that process is a creative asset. You want that whole human, right? Like, if I'm sitting down at my desk, if I'm getting in the cutting room, and I am like turning the human being off, and it's purely a calculated thing, I'm going to miss things instinctually. I'm going to miss the feeling that one shot put next to another makes you feel. I'm going to miss, like, the resonance of a particular answer to a question. And I think there's something creatively, it makes me think about writers, right? Because, like, when a writer writes a book over the course of however long, months and months, sometimes years, they experience so much as a human being throughout the course of that creative process, right? And I think that if you're doing it right, that gives the work a sense of wholeness. It feels like it's created by a whole human about whole humans. And that's part of what makes media powerful too, is acknowledging that, like, I would say, even if you're making a brand video, even if the point of your video is like a commercial to get people to buy a product, right? I think that when you're making something like that and feels like it exists outside of the world that everybody lives in, it's not going to connect as well. It's not going to be as resonant. I don't know, there's just a sense of being honest about that I think actually makes media more empathetic and more connective. And I try to build that into my process. I'm a human working on this shit every single day. Like, there's no stage where I'm a media production robot. I am always a human, and my moods give and take. And I try to bring, professionalism means being thoughtful about that. Professionalism means, like, I will frequently edit a set of photos, right? Like, sometimes I'm editing photos well into the evening, and not always, but sometimes, because that's just when I've carved out the time. And I frequently do things, videos too. I frequently build things into my production schedule where I'm like, okay, this feels really good. This proposal I put together feels really good. This video I put together feels really good. I'm going to step away because I know tomorrow I'll be a different person. I'll be in a different mood. I will have had a different dream. I will have had a different breakfast, whatever. I have different things on my calendar. I want that person to consider the work too.
Oh,
And
that's so
maybe,
smart.
like maybe there's a photo that I shouldn't include, that person the next day is like, I don't really know about that one. Or maybe the next day I see something in an interview that resonates, that didn't resonate the day before. And if you can incorporate the variance in your own perspective as a human being, I think that only makes the work richer at the end.
It's like you're anticipating doubt, but then you're
Hmm.
integrating doubt into your process.
Yes, yes, that's really well put. Yes, couldn't have said it better myself. Because it's not an exact science. I think, some creatives, maybe as part of their sales positioning, would like to communicate that what they do is an exact science and that it's really perfect. I don't know if I can be honest about who I am as a human, and I can be honest as a witness to the people I interview of who they are as humans. The media is going to be richer. I'm not afraid for it to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid for it to be like painful one day. You don't want it to feel messy in its execution, but I think if it feels like it's made by messy, vulnerable humans, if like there's a sense of imperfection in what you're portraying or what the work actually looks like, those people in the JREP video who work for these community organizations, I think if you include a detail where their work is imperfect or they made a mistake at some point or, they don't always nail it, that makes it a richer, more believable story. It makes me think about like, I don't know, maybe we talked about this the other day, but like sometimes subjects want to remove. I have this motto with my photos that I never remove something from someone's face. Maybe if it's like that is obviously a zit and they're not going to like that, but I'm not taking someone's
Something
favorite
that's
bump
not
off their face.
normally there. Yeah.
Yes, yes, but maybe that bump is their favorite bump. I'm not touching that bump. That's an
Yeah.
important bump. That bump is like part of how they communicate and part of their personality and part of the recognition of their face, right? But I think there's this instinct, especially among people of certain socializations, that like part of presenting yourself in media is almost like a glammed up, more perfect version of themselves. It's like, and I understand like glamour and looking good, and that's all great, but I frequently advocate to my clients like, no, like the messiness is part of the story. Like the fact that you have that. I'm going to speak about myself in this way, right? Like the fact that I have wrinkle under my eyes because I've cried a lot is part of what makes me an interesting, connective human.
Yes.
Like the part of me having like lines on my face from where I smile. There's more
It
instinct,
shows
more.
a life lived.
Yes, and people pick up on that shit. We don't always admit it, but it's true. They see the life lived in my face, and that makes me a more connective, memorable person. And I think media is the same. I don't think pursuing like an image of absolute perfection is actually good for media. I think you want it to feel real. You want it to feel like authentically imperfect. Like the strategy and the execution and the goal setting and the connection of the results to the goals, that part should be like as pristine as possible. But in terms of the story you're telling, I think you have to allow for the whole ride. There has to be highs and lows, there has to be dips, there have to be bad days, there has to be evidence of the bad days, because it's a more compelling story.
I completely agree. And I know, I mean, especially with the rise of automated technology looking to replace creative work, be it, you know,
Hmm.
input some words into a machine and there's your logo for your business.
Totally.
I could filter in some footage and now it's animated. You know, I think we would both agree that human creativity is irreplaceable to make like an end result that is effective and builds connection and has a better
Hmm.
result and return. But can you talk a little bit about like how your work is changing, if at all, from AI? Like, are you using AI at all?
I use it to replicate my own style and voice, right? Like I use it to check a level of consistency between my proposals and my presentation and to make sure that there are details there that I'm not missing. Another thing that I'm glad you brought this up, like another thing that I have found AI incredibly useful at is battling imposter syndrome. Because if you feed a whole bunch of information about your business into one of those AI chatbots, and then you're having a day where you don't really believe in yourself or you sort of lose sight of what you're doing, the AI does not have imposter syndrome. And also, unlike a friend who you confide in, the AI is not going to tell you what you want to hear. There is a level of like grounded analytical data that those things are driven by, and they have a sense of context for your rates, your packages, your positioning, your brand language. They have so much information about that, right? So I think if you can use those tools in a way where you are informing it about your approach and the way you do things, and then using it to help you replicate that approach as much as possible and maintain sort of an objective perspective over the course of your work, they're incredibly useful in that way. There are some ways too, actually, like this is something else I'm thinking about, that like there are some technical aspects of those tools that have helped me understand how to scale my photography business. You know, I used to paint edits onto the subject by hand for every photo I delivered to the client, right? But now you can do this thing where you're like, okay, what do I want the style? You know, and I have a house style, I have a certain way I edit things, a certain way I like things to look. Now I can do this thing where I'm like, okay, like let's consider what the environment was like on this particular day shooting. And maybe I'll take one photo that has a group of people in it, and I will make sure, okay, I want to make sure the lighting on the people looks like this, and here's what I want the saturation to look like, and I want to like give them a little bit of skin softening because everyone likes that. And you know, a really good example is teeth whitening. Everyone likes a teeth whitening, right? Everyone wants a little digital brush up, right? You used to have to go through every single photo and like get your cursor and manually brush their teeth.
Yep.
And that shit took forever. It was
Yo, yeah.
really time consuming. And you know, like it has its downsides. But that is something that those technologies have been incredibly useful at. Now you can whiten your subject's teeth in one photo, copy that, paste it on the other photos, and it finds the teeth. And it's imperfect and it doesn't always work perfectly, but literally saves me like 2 hours of brushing people's teeth. Like
Yeah.
it is
And then it
incredible.
becomes like you're reviewing the work and then you still need to go in and make adjustments to get it to up to the standard that you feel is right.
100%. And you know, if anything, like I think if we're using these technologies correctly, they are boy, this gets into like stuff about like the global economy as well, right? But like if we're using AI to replace parts of our process, it should free us up to bring the human element to more of the creative decision making.
Yes.
You know, it's time I can consider like how to present that work to the client, like what that delivery should look like, to think about like, oh wow, in my next shoot, like what could I do creatively that I didn't think about this time around? Like it frees up so much space for creativity if we're doing it right, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, lots of caveats there. There are lots of forces that are going to make that difficult for people to like do really meaningful artistic work, right? But I think ideally those technologies are taking away some of like, is this a word? The meniality of
We
these
can make it a
processes.
word.
Yeah, taking out some of the meniality of these processes and allowing us to really focus on like the core decision making elements that we can do better than they can, you know?
Yeah.
But they're very useful.
How would you justify, like, if you had a client who, I mean, I feel like I'm just going to answer my own question here, but when I think about like, you're faced with a client who, they want to hire you to create a brand messaging video for them,
Hmm.
but they want you to justify why hiring you is more effective than just having AI do it. And I would
Oh,
think, I mean, one, you're already working with people who understand the value of your work. So if
Yeah.
someone's like, why don't I just make AI do it instead of you? It's like, okay, clearly there's like a fundamental values unalignment there. So maybe
Yeah.
I'm not the right fit for you. But
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that? Like
Mm,
how integral human creativity is if you're looking to get a solid end result?
totally. Okay, it makes me think about two things, right? Like on a brass tacks level, like what's different between me and I forget what they're called, but one of those like generative tools for images, right? What's the difference, right? Like I feel things. That motherfucker doesn't feel shit. Like it doesn't. It's not capable of feeling, right? And I think anyone who actually does creative work, maybe the people who sometimes deploy it or sometimes are trying to put it out in the world, maybe don't actually make it whole cloth themselves. But anyone who does knows how much feeling is wrapped up in it and how that's intrinsic to creating work that's actually connective, is understanding what that connection feels like. That's the thing they can't do, right? And it's like, it's never going away. Like they're going to get better on a technical level. They're going to get better at human language. They're going to get better at creating things that look professional, right? But they don't care about the client. They don't care about the subject. They don't care what someone is going to feel on the other end because that's not their purview, right? The other thing I would say about like, especially art, like AI generated art, right, is there's this really interesting dynamic. I'm going to be like real plain about the way I talk about this, right? So much about what's going on with AI right now is so driven by like venture capital and like trying to grow companies and like creating an ecosystem that drives investment, which that's just part of how our world works, right? Like they were obsessed with the metaverse for a little while. There'll be something else in 5 years that they're really obsessed with. And like these AI tools are not going away, right? But man, like, okay, look at any brand that uses AI generated imagery in their marketing. People hate that shit.
Hate it.
They hate it. And they're trying to pretend. There's this thing going on in business right now where they're trying to pretend doesn't happen every single time, but it happens every single time. Every time a musician AI generates a concert poster, people throw a hissy fit. They fucking hate it. Every time a TV show is like, we AI generated the animation at the beginning of people fucking
It's like,
hate
yeah,
it.
we know.
Yes. And we talk about it in this way where we think they hate it because it's replacing human labor. And that is fucked up. You know, like there's a creative who could have gotten paid. But the other reason they hate it is that they don't feel anything. When they look
Yep.
at it, they feel nothing. And they know that. And that is like, really glad we're talking about this because that is so at the core of what I do, is this belief that there is an intrinsic instinctual feeling that people have in their hearts when something is authentic, when something rings true, when something is connected to their human experience, that feeling of empathy that filmmakers and photographers and writers are all trying to bake into their work, right? The thing that AI can't do. People know when it's missing. They know when it's missing. They don't have to have any training. They don't have to be a creative. Like you could take someone off the fucking street and show them two pieces of art, and the one that has that human element will connect with their hearts. If the person creating the work has done the empathetic work that I try to build into my process as much as possible, they're going to feel that, even if they have no training with which to feel it. It's instinctual. And there is like a really pernicious lie that we're telling about AI's ability to replace that and AI's ability to get
Yes.
that down. And again, these are invaluable tools that are not going anywhere, but they're going to be useful again because they free up space for us to do that empathetic work.
Absolutely.
That's what's going to be
Yeah.
powerful about them.
Like a key word there is tool. It's a
Yeah,
tool. It supplements. It
yeah,
reminds me of like I've been so fired up. And I think a lot of this is just like LinkedIn clickbait in order to like
Totally.
mine engagement, and I fall for it because I get so angry about it. But like, I took this clip from The Office and I ran it through, ran it through this generative AI thing,
Yes.
and like, look how easy this was, look how good this looks, and it's just like, you're not accounting for the writers, the set design, the actors,
Yeah.
the showrunner, all the different elements that got to that final product. It's like, you just run it
Yes.
through a mill to regenerate it. You haven't really created anything. Like, there was some post recently, once that Studio Ghibli
That's
image
exactly what I was
generator came out,
thinking.
like, someone said, like, finally art is now accessible. It's like,
Yeah.
it's always been accessible. The ability to create
Mhm.
is within us all. You just haven't explored it.
Yes. Yeah. You know what else is accessible? Fucking pencils. Like what are we talking about here?
And
Like,
even still, you got to buy a pencil, get a rock,
yes,
draw on some
totally.
sidewalk, flint,
Scrape
anything.
something
Like,
out.
you can, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that example because I think we were both in that comment section on that post. But there's there's you know the studio. Oh my god, I lost my ability to speak. The studio. Oh my gosh, the Studio Ghibli image generator. Right, it had its moment in the sun. Everyone was like, "Oh wow, cool! We turned whatever it was, this celebrity, into a Studio Ghibli character." No one is talking about that anymore. Like it
It's
was
gone.
here and gone. It went
Yeah.
off into the ethos. Like no one gives a shit beyond that moment of initial fascination that it's capable of doing that, right? They're like, man, maybe someone who cares will play this back and I'll look like a real fool, but I don't think so. Like it's never gonna figure that out. Like AI is never gonna be able to solve that problem because if you are the reason why art builds lasting connections and is memorable and sticks in people's minds, the reason why we sometimes undercut this, even creatives, right? Like the power of a film or a piece of music or a photographic body of work, we will talk about something for 100 fucking years. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I don't think the reason why we talk about something for 100 years is because like their quantifiable technical execution was so great. Like that's not why we do that. It's because they captured something about the human experience that we continue to relate to. You know, like I'm not a super talented musician, but the Beatles songs are all like four chords in 4/4. There's nothing crazy complicated going on there. We've been talking about their music for decades and decades and decades because it captured something about like what our day-to-day human experience is that a vast majority of people find really captivating. Um, the technology is never going to catch up to that. Like it's never going to be able to figure that out because it hasn't lived a human life. And again, like
Yeah.
they're useful tools, but anyone who's trying to tell you that one day those technologies will be able to replace human labor is fundamentally misunderstanding what is connective about art. They
Yes.
don't understand. And there are a lot of people out there who do not understand. And I don't know, I would tell every creative to like uh, hold that in their heart for the next few years. You know, there is something intrinsically valuable about what you do that is core to like your perspective and your existence as a being and your care and consideration for other people. That is always going to be valuable. And I think if anything, that is a reason to do this work with your whole heart. That is a reason to do it in that way. And you know, the process and the procedure and the technical excellence is important. It's part of what makes you a professional, but bringing yourself to the work and respecting your own perspective and respecting the perspective of your subjects and opening yourself up to that genuine connection, that is what makes it lasting and that's what makes it powerful.
How have your interpretations of success and failure changed throughout your career? Because to me, it sounds like you're living the life that you choose. You
Mm-hmm.
are creating work that is value driven, aligned with things that you believe in, like you get to have a leisurely morning staring
Yeah.
lovingly at your dog drinking like delicious local Portland coffee. Like
Yes.
hell yeah, that's
The
success
good
to
shit.
me.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
how has it shifted for you? Like did you always envision that as success?
Oh, this is a really good question. Um, First of all, this is gonna make me emotional. If I could go back in time and sit down with 5 years ago me, the career and life that I have now, I would never believe you that I could have it. I thought it was impossible. I thought it was not in the cards. Um, it's really funny because there's something really deeply spiritual about that, because I think so much of so much of what's been integral to me growing into the creative that I am, oh, there's like this little germ of self-belief that lives inside my heart, that believes in authentic connection, that believes it's the way I want to like live and create things. But as a creative, you will encounter a lot of people who are too afraid to do that, and a lot of information that discourages you from doing that. And it's part of how, when you first start setting out, it's part of how you interpret feedback. There's this feeling of like, oh, the authentic me is sort of being rejected, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, my entire career is built off of like being a steadfast ally to that germ inside my heart. Like I show up for my clients real hard, but I show up for that creative germ inside my heart harder, because it has gotten me through so much. Like it has paved a road to a life that I never dreamed of. Um, yeah, I didn't think any of this was possible. And I think what made it possible, there is this feeling, I think, as a creative and as an entrepreneur, where you feel a little bit out on a limb. You end up encountering this feeling of like, wow, a lot of people are telling me that it's not really possible to do things this way, and that I have to be a little bit more externally motivated in terms of my validation, and that this unique process or this unique perspective that I'm developing isn't inherently valuable, and I should just do things how other people do it. But at this point in my career, I can look back and recognize that stepping out of tradition, or stepping out of what's expected, or honestly, demanding more of your life, demanding more from what you want and what you want your lifestyle and creativity to look like long term, that is where you're creating value. That is where like truly transformational art gets made. Like, and it's this thing where if you think about other creatives, if you slow yourself down and see the creatives who are most successful, including commercially, right? The creatives who are making gob-stopping amounts of money with their creativity, when someone tells them that they need to do things like everybody else, they don't listen. That's how they got there, right? And if you're running a commercial enterprise, if you're running a business, there's always a degree of compromise. But I think at this point in my career, the art of it is being, again, really, really knowledgeable and mindful about my clients' goals and holding those really, really close to my heart. But then throughout the process, I am constantly advocating for my unique perspective and way of doing things.
Yes.
And that isn't just like a tough account management problem, it's where the value comes from. The fact that in that client relationship, I am advocating for a unique approach or way of doing things that I have honed over the course of years in my career and proven to myself to be valuable, is where the value comes from. You know, there's this thing in photography where I meet young photographers, and they'll have this idea of like, what I'm doing sucks, what I'm doing isn't important. I remember feeling this way. I remember feeling this sense of like, I was so afraid to take pictures of people for so long. Like it
Huh.
really intimidated me, you know? Um, But something that's really cool about photography is that if you just practice it, you are creating something valuable, period. There are things that environmentally and in terms of your relationships and styles and ideas that appeal to you. And if you listen to that voice, you will get somewhere special and unique. Years down the line, you will have created a style of photography that no one else has. And it's like, you almost can't fail at that. Like, there's no way to fuck it up. If you are following your heart in terms of what you want to make photos of, guess what? You have a style, you have an eye. And over the course of many years and many years of practice, I've been making photos for, I don't know, more than 2 decades at this place, like at this point. That's where the value comes from. Like that is valuable. But I've almost forgotten your question. I'm sorry, but that it's a deeply spiritual journey. It's a deeply spiritual journey. And when you're carving out space for something that you know in your heart is valuable, there's this simultaneous feeling of knowing it's true, feeling it's true, but being a little out on a limb about it. And I think where you can go wrong with that, and I've definitely gone wrong, where you can go wrong with that is thinking that when a client or a person doesn't understand that value, that's a rejection and they're your enemy. That like, that is a fail state that you have to avoid. At this point in my career, I understand that when that happens, that is the crux of my work. That's showtime. Like I'm trying to get better and better about it every year. But at this point, I rub my hands together and I'm like, oh, this is the good shit. This is the part where I get to advocate for, like, in my case, the fact that authentic stories and genuine human connection and letting people speak the way they speak and be who they are will find results. It will create media that is lasting and impactful and motivating. Like, every chance I get to advocate for that against resistance or in the face of doubt or when the path is unclear, that's just not just a learning opportunity for me, but at its core, that's why they're hiring me. They're hiring me because I understand that. And because I'm not just going to do what everybody else does. I'm not just going to do strictly what's expected of me. I'm going to value my own creative perspective in that moment. That is the value.
Absolutely. What aspect of being a professional creative do you wish more people understood?
And
this can be clients. This can be, I hate using the phrase non-creatives because that's not a real thing, but in the sense of like non-professional creatives,
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I would want them to understand that maybe they miss is that there is not just time to feel something about it, but that the result will be better if you sit in that moment. Like, I think there's this notion in our culture that to do something professionally or to accomplish, especially a business goal, that there isn't any time for feeling, right? And that's a complicated notion. I think, a large part of that idea is deeply misogynist. And, there are a lot of power structures that want you to believe that there aren't time for feelings. But that's what I'd really say, less than some sort of procedural thing or, again, the value of creative perspective, which people sometimes miss. I'm always struck by how many people hire creatives and then this sounds like I'm being spicy, but it's true. They hire creatives and then they want to dictate exactly how that person should do their work. It's a huge missed opportunity. You're sort of misunderstanding what you're hiring someone for, But more than that, I think there is such rich insight and connection and potential and results and commercial results in taking time to feel something about it, like letting yourself care in that way, letting yourself connect personally and take it personally. I think if you can carve that out in your creative process, it isn't just as simple as like well, at least you had a good time, or at least you listened to yourself. Like, I really believe that's what makes the work good. If you follow your heart about it, because again, there are parts of this that I think there are parts of quality creativity and quality creative relationships that are so intrinsic and deep to who we are as humans. They're irrefutable. It's happening all the time. We don't always have the words for it, but it is true of, in my opinion, every single human being on earth, even the most like narcissistic, close-minded, anxious, rat race human being, still wants to connect. Like they want that. It's core to who we are. So yeah, that's a thing I think I would want more people to understand, is that there is time and space for that. And that I think if you're doing your work right as a creative, that's a big part of what you're doing, is carving out that time and space. I think that's just how you create stuff that lasts, that has value beyond the immediate moment or the immediate business objectives. And the thing that I think people misunderstand is they think that that's like in conflict with the business objectives, but in my experience, if you're running your business in a way that makes room for that irrefutable fact that human beings want to connect, that's the key to success. That's how you do it, like lasting success, quality relationships, like work that regards the people that you work with and regards their experience.
Less
That's how you get there.
transactional, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Those things are not at odds, but I think there's a lot of forces in our world, a lot of like traditional power structures that would like you to believe that it is.
Sure.
And I have had moments and probably will still have moments where I lose sight of that and feel kind of hopeless about it. But I'm in this place in my life right now, Sarah, where understanding that when things feel most hopeless, when I get really sad about like not living in a world that cherishes connection more, that's exactly when I should advocate for authentic connection. That's exactly
Hell
when I need to
yeah.
do it.
Hell yeah.
It's
I am so honored to feature your story and your thought process here, because I feel like, exactly what you said, especially with how dark things are right now, like giving
mhm,
that light of hope that this is the way to approach things versus, having it be like purely transactional, purely automated, really
mhm,
valuing emotionality and centering feelings in your work. Yes, it's vulnerable, but that's not a weakness. That's
yeah,
strength, and that is inherently what makes us human.
yeah, totally, totally. People try, to your point, like about the state of the world, people try to pretend they're apart from that, but they're not. Like, you can't escape the like messy emotional soup that is being a human being. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I remember
intrinsic.
like being in past jobs and like running to the bathroom to cry, or,
Mhm,
having to be infallible. I never made mistakes, and I was miserable. I really struggled
mhm,
with the idea of like with identity and who was I as a person, as a creative, and just I think it's important to really allow yourself to be reflected in how you work and why you
yeah,
work, and that
yeah,
becomes like, again, that's it's vulnerable. It's how you build trust with other people. It's how you like forge real connection.
yeah. It's worth having faith in.
I
It is.
agree.
Um, yeah, having faith in it will feed you in a way that sometimes doesn't seem possible, but is remarkably consistent. Sort of always delivers.
What a great way to wrap this up. I keep coming back to something Ellie said about the moments when you have to fight hardest for genuine connection, when it feels impossible or when people are resistant. Like, those are actually when you create the most value. That insight keeps rolling around in my head because it challenges this idea that authentic work should always feel easy. It's hard. And now that you've heard it, how perfect is that wrestling metaphor? Because that idea of having your moves planned but staying completely present for what your scene partner gives you, that's creative work right there. That's collaboration. That's being prepared but not rigid. If this conversation hit you the way it hit me, I want to hear about it. You can find me on Instagram at Creatives Processing, or you can email me at creativesprocessing@wordofmouthcreative.co. But for real, the thing that makes my day is when you rate the show and leave a comment. If Eliana's perspective on building authentic professional relationships resonated with you, share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. Or really anyone who could use a reminder that success doesn't have to look like what everyone else is doing. You can find Eliana's work at Human-Centric and their artist-owned licensing library, Ultramarine Photo, at ultramarinephoto.com. You can follow them at Human-Centric Media and at ultramarine.photo on Instagram. Thanks for listening to Creatives Processing. I'm Sarah Mulligan-Williams, Creative Director behind Word of Mouth. Till next time, stay human, stay curious.